Imagine you are a soldier in the most powerful army the world has ever seen. An empire that lasted 1,000 years, that ruled from Britain to the desert, that believed itself eternal. And you are alive at the exact moment it crumbles beneath your feet. You would be just an ordinary legionary, born into a Rome that was no longer the Rome of legend. And here is the truth almost no one tells you. Rome did not fall in a day. It did not fall in a single battle. It rotted from within, slowly, for more than 100 years. When people say the fall of Rome, they picture barbarians smashing through the gates in a single night. The reality is stranger and far more unsettling. The greatest empire of antiquity died so quietly that many of the people living through it never even realized it was happening. To understand the end, you have to understand the scale. At its height, the Roman Empire stretched across nearly 5 million square kilometers and ruled perhaps 60 million people, a quarter of all humanity at the time. It had roads, aqueducts, sewers, written laws. It was the pinnacle of the ancient world. The soldiers of that age grew up hearing that Rome was invincible. For nearly 800 years, no foreign enemy had set foot inside the city of Rome itself. The idea that it could ever fall simply did not fit inside anyone's mind. And it was precisely that certainty that made it blind. But the empire those soldiers served had already been sick for generations. In the century before Flavius was born, Rome had nearly ended once before, in a period of chaos that historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. In just 50 years, more than 20 emperors rose to the throne, and almost all of them were murdered. Generals killed generals. The army, which was supposed to protect the empire, became its greatest threat. It sold the throne to the highest bidder. And then came the slowest poison of all, money. To pay soldiers and fund wars, the emperors began to debase their own currency. The Roman silver coin, the denarius, was mixed with cheap metal until almost no silver remained, less than 1%. The result was an inflation that destroyed trust in everything. Prices soared. In some regions, the cost of living rose by more than 1,000%. A pound of gold, once worth a few tens of thousands of coins, came to be worth 75,000. Rome's money became painted paper, only it was made of metal. An emperor named Diocletian tried to fix it all. In the year 301, he issued a law fixing the price of more than 1,000 goods, with the death penalty for anyone who charged more. It did not work. Merchants simply hid their wares. Rome's economy was breaking, and no decree could repair it. It was also Diocletian who made the most fateful decision of all. The empire was too vast for one man to govern. So, around the year 285, he split it in half, one half in the west, with Rome, the other in the east, richer, which would one day have as its capital the city of Constantinople. Hold on to this, because it is the key to the whole story. From this moment on, there are 2 Romes, and only one of them will fall. The wealthy eastern half will survive for another 1,000 years. The poor western half has its days numbered, and almost no one yet knows it. For the soldiers on the frontier, the threat did not come from within. It came from outside, from the far side of the rivers that marked the border, the Rhine and the Danube. There began the world the Romans called, with contempt, barbarian. But that word deceives. The barbarians were not stupid savages. They were entire peoples, Goths, Vandals, Franks, Sarmatians, many of whom admired Rome, spoke Latin, and wanted to live inside the empire, not destroy it. For decades, they served in the Roman army itself. The problem was that, far away, on the steppes of Asia, a terrifying force had begun to move. Horsemen who came out of nowhere, swift as the wind, more brutal than anyone had ever seen. The Romans gave them a name that would become a synonym for terror: the Huns. The Huns were not coming for Rome, not yet. They were driving everyone in front of them. Entire peoples, terrified, fled toward the Roman borders, begging for shelter. It was not an invasion. It was a crowd of desperate refugees pounding at the gate. In the year 376, tens of thousands of Goths reached the banks of the Danube begging to be let in. The Eastern Emperor, Valens, allowed it. But then the Roman officials did something unforgivable. They exploited, robbed, and starved those refugees. Starving and humiliated, the Goths took up arms. And in the year 378, near the city of Adrianople, the unthinkable happened. The Roman army, commanded by Emperor Valens himself, was massacred. Valens died on the battlefield. Half of Rome's eastern army, perhaps 20,000 men, was destroyed in a single day. For the soldiers of Rome, it was an earthquake. The invincible legion had been annihilated by the very people it despised. Adrianople changed everything. For the first time, it became clear that Rome could no longer expel the barbarians nor defeat them. The desperate solution was worse. The empire began to let entire peoples settle within its borders, with their own laws and their own armies. Rome grew ever more dependent on soldiers who were not Roman. The sons of its citizens no longer wanted to fight. So the empire hired the barbarians themselves to defend it from other barbarians. The legionaries now served alongside men who, 20 years earlier, had been their enemies. And here is the deadly irony. The army that protected Rome barely had any Romans left inside it. The day those soldiers decided they no longer needed an emperor, that day would come, and you could feel it drawing near. At the head of the Goths rose a man named Alaric. He had fought for the Romans. He knew the army from the inside. All he wanted, at first, was simple: land for his people and a respected general's post. Rome refused again and again. So Alaric marched on the city of Rome itself, not to destroy it, to force a deal. He surrounded the city and starved it. Even so, Rome kept stalling, breaking promises, playing for time, until Alaric ran out of patience. On the night of the 24th of August, in the year 410, the gates of the city swung open, most likely betrayed from within, and the Goths poured into Rome. For the first time in nearly 800 years, a foreign enemy set foot inside the Eternal City. The sack lasted 3 days. And here is a surprise. It was not the bloodbath the legends tell. The Goths were Christians. They spared the great churches, and most of the people and buildings survived. It was more plunder than massacre. But the real damage was not physical. It was psychological. The news raced across the known world like a thunderclap. Rome had been sacked. To those living through it, it was as if the sky had fallen. A thinker of the age, Saint Jerome, wrote that the city which had conquered the whole world was, herself, conquered. For those living through it, this was the moment the fantasy of invincibility died for good. If Rome could be sacked once, it could be sacked again. And the myth that held the entire empire together, the myth that Rome was eternal, began to unravel in the mind of every citizen. Alaric died a few months later, probably of a fever. Legend says his men diverted an entire river to bury him in its bed, then killed the slaves who dug the tomb, so the place would never be found. To this day, no one knows where Alaric lies. But the sack of 410 was only the rehearsal. Rome's true death would be slow, carved away piece by piece, territory by territory. And while that was happening, the last man who nearly saved the West emerged. His name was Aetius, a brilliant Roman general, perhaps the last. As a young man, he had been a hostage among the Huns themselves, and because of that he knew them better than any Roman alive. He knew their tactics, their language, their weaknesses. That knowledge would be worth the fate of Europe. Because now the Huns had a king. And what a king! A man whose name still sends a chill down the spine, Attila. The chroniclers called him the Scourge of God, because they said the grass never grew back where his horse had trodden. Attila united the tribes of the Huns into a single iron fist and demanded ever greater tributes of gold from Rome. For years, the empire paid. It paid to avoid being attacked. Until, in the year 451, Attila turned his eyes toward the west and invaded Gaul, present-day France, with an immense army. The army marched to stop the impossible, and something no one expected happened. The Roman general Aetius made an alliance with the Visigoths, the same Goths who had sacked Rome. Romans and barbarians, side by side, against a common enemy. The two armies clashed on the Catalonian plains, near Chalons. It was one of the bloodiest battles of antiquity. And in the end, Attila, the invincible Attila, was stopped. He retreated. For the first and only time, The scourge of God had been held back. It was Rome's last great victory, but the victory came at a bitter cost. Attila did not die in the battle. He returned the following year and ravaged northern Italy. And then history took one of its most absurd turns. Attila died on his own wedding night, of a hemorrhage, drowned in his own blood. The man who terrorized the world was killed by a burst artery. With Attila dead, the empire of the Huns fell apart within a few years. Rome had survived, but the hero who saved it would meet a dark fate. The Western Emperor, Valentinian, was jealous and afraid of the general Aetius, the man who had saved him. And so, in an act of pure stupidity, the emperor himself drew his sword and killed Aetius with his own hands during an audience. A courtier's reaction went down in history. He is said to have told the emperor, "My lord, you have just cut off your own right hand with your left." He was right. Rome had murdered the last man capable of defending it. For what remained of the army, it was the final sentence. Without Aetius, there was no more general, no more plan, no more real Rome. All that was left was to wait for the next blow. And it came quickly. Just 3 years later, in the year 455, came the second sack, worse than the first. This time it was the Vandals, come from North Africa, led by their king Genseric. Unlike the Goths, the Vandals were in no hurry. They spent 2 full weeks stripping Rome of everything of value. They even tore the gilded bronze tiles from the great temple of Jupiter. It was so methodical, so complete, that the name of this people became a word we still use today: vandalism. With each passing decade, the map of the West shrank. Britain had already been abandoned. Gaul, Hispania, Africa, one by one, the provinces fell or were handed over to barbarian kings. Rome, which had once ruled the world, could barely rule Italy itself. And the emperors? They became puppets. In the last 20 years of the West, 9 emperors came and went, nearly all of them installed and toppled by barbarian generals who truly ran things behind the scenes. The man wearing the crown was mere decoration. Anyone who had been young at the start of all this was now old, and had seen everything. He had seen the currency turn to dust, the refugees turn into conquerors, the hero murdered by his own emperor. And now he watched the title of Emperor of Rome become worth less than the sword of any Germanic general. The real commander of Italy's army was a general named Orestes, and it was he who staged the final act of this tragedy. He placed his own son on the throne, a boy. A child who barely understood what was happening would be the last emperor of Rome. The boy's name was, ironically, perfect. He was called Romulus, like the legendary founder of Rome, and Augustus, like the first emperor. The Romans mockingly nicknamed him Augustulus, the little Augustus. The Rome that was born with a Romulus would die with another. But the Germanic soldiers of the army made a simple demand. They wanted land in Italy to live on, as so many peoples already had. Orestes refused. It was the last mistake of the Western Roman Empire. The soldiers rose up under one of their leaders, a man named Odoacer. They killed Orestes, and they marched on the boy emperor, hidden away in Ravenna, the last capital. On the 4th of September, in the year 476, Odoacer deposed Romulus Augustulus. And here is the detail that makes it all even stranger. He did not kill the boy. He decided it wasn't worth it. He sent him off to a villa in the south with a pension. The last emperor of Rome simply retired. And that was how it happened. No epic battle at the gates. No grand siege. The Western Roman Empire ended with the almost administrative removal of a teenager no one respected. The greatest empire of the ancient world went out like a candle. Odoacer did something symbolic and chilling. He did not take the title of emperor for himself. Instead, he sent the imperial insignia, the crown and the mantle of Rome, back to the emperor in the east, in Constantinople. The message was clear: there is no longer an emperor in the west. The office was vacant. Forever. And now comes the part that turns the whole story on its head. Everything you just heard is true, and yet it is incomplete. Because in the year 476, Rome did not end. Half of it remained alive, prosperous, and powerful. Remember the 2 Romes? The eastern half, with its capital at Constantinople, did not even blink when the West fell. Richer, more populous, better defended, it went on calling itself the Roman Empire. Its people called themselves Romans, and would go on calling themselves that for another 1,000 years. We give this empire a name it never once used. We call it the Byzantine Empire. But that is an invention of modern historians. To the people who lived there, it was Rome. The same Rome, simply continuing in the East after the West went dark. So think about this. While Western Europe was sinking into the dark centuries, the Romans of the East preserved Roman law, classical Greek, engineering, and the faith. Constantinople was the largest and richest city in the Christian world, with walls that withstood siege after siege. The Eastern Roman Empire did not truly fall until the year 1453, nearly 1,000 years after the boy Romulus Augustulus, when the Ottoman Turks finally took Constantinople. Strictly speaking, Rome survived almost until the time Columbus crossed the Atlantic. That is why the sentence, Rome fell in 476, is half truth, half myth. What fell was the western half, exhausted and broken. The idea of Rome, the name of Rome, the legacy of Rome, those did not fall. They simply changed address. And then comes the trillion-dollar question, why? In the end, did the West fall? The honest answer is the most uncomfortable of all. There was no single cause, no lone culprit. It was a sum of poisons acting together over generations. The inflation that destroyed the economy, the dependence on foreign armies, borders too vast to defend, the constant civil war over the throne, the pressure of peoples pushed forward by the Huns, and an elite that, in the end, exploited its own empire more than it protected it. For centuries, the most famous explanation came from an English historian, Edward Gibbon. He blamed Christianity above all. He argued the new faith had softened Rome's warrior spirit and drained its resources into the church. The idea was powerful, and today almost no historian accepts it in full. You have perhaps heard the strangest theory of all, that Rome fell from lead poisoning, from its water pipes and cooking pots. It is a fascinating story, and almost certainly an exaggeration. The Romans themselves knew the dangers of lead, and there is no proof it brought down the empire. It is a myth. The truth that science and history point to is less dramatic and more frightening. Empires do not die from a single stab. They die from 1,000 small cuts over a very long time, while those inside believe everything is fine. This is perhaps the most unsettling legacy of the fall of Rome. The people who lived through it rarely knew they were living through the end. For most of them, life went on. The taxes went on, the harvests went on. The great empire came apart so slowly that it was almost invisible from within. And what did Rome leave behind? Almost everything. The alphabet you are reading, the words of the Latin languages, like Portuguese and Spanish, the idea of citizenship, of the republic, of written laws equal for all, the roads, the concrete, the calendar, sanitation. Modern Europe was built, quite literally, upon the rubble of Rome. The Catholic Church itself inherited the structure of the empire, the Latin, the hierarchy, the capital in Rome. When the emperor vanished from the West, it was the Pope who filled the void. In a sense, Rome never let go of power. It merely traded the crown for the mitre. Centuries later, kings and dictators would still dream of being the new Roman emperor. Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire, the Tsars of Russia. The word Tsar and the word Kaiser both come from Caesar. 1,500 years after the death of the boy Romulus, rulers were still stealing the name of Rome to lend themselves legitimacy. So did Rome really fall? Or did it just transform into all of us? Perhaps that is the most honest question. The empire vanished from the map, but its shadow covers the Western world to this day. In every law, every straight road, every word that ends in "tine." And what of the ordinary legionaries? Men like that died without ever knowing they had witnessed the end of an era. They woke up one day in an empire, and the next in a barbarian kingdom, and the water still ran through the aqueducts, and the sun still rose over the hills. The end of the world, in the end, looked like an ordinary day. If this story gripped you, do one thing for me. Comment below with what surprised you most. that Rome survived 1,000 years in the East, that the last emperor was a boy sent into retirement, or that no one who lived through it realized it was the end. And if you love history told the way it deserves to be told, grand, real, and impossible to forget, subscribe to World and Stories. Because the world is full of stories like this one, waiting to be told. 1,000-year empire did not die by the sword. It died of exhaustion, from the inside out, while everyone looked the other way. And perhaps that is the lesson Rome whispers to every empire that came after it. Until the next story.